Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. This is the end of March. And it's the March tape. The March tape. As I was coming up the hill, I was checking out all of the things that I could talk about, and there are a few. And basically, once again, I'm just checking the tape. Every now and then we find a slow one that doesn't want to record right, so I'm just sort of filling up a little space here to see if this tape's going to work just fine, and if it's, wound up okay. Looks to be doing quite well. So let me just run it back and check and see how we're doing. Alright, so we seem to be doing pretty darn good right now. Oh, God, what a beautiful day. Sun's out, snow's white. It's sparkling. I'm excited. I'm having a good time. I noticed that the beauty of the mountain is really starting to crank out. We've had a couple snows here in the last day, and when it snows this way, it covers everything. There's like nothing, and the top of the mountain becomes very mystical, and there's all sorts of stuff to be seen. And so I'm just kind of hanging out here with a few things. If you noticed, you sort of got your February, March tape together. That was because I've been on the road for an extended state of time, and I only like to do the tapes up here on the mountain, and I only like to do them when I'm inspired. February's tape dealt with timing on all of the different bodies. And I think there's a part of it that I might have forgotten that I would like to add on to this, and then we'll just shoot around to varied and sundried things, because I'm going to cover a couple subjects that I really haven't covered. Timing, like I said in the February tape, it's all in the timing. And the flow is to stay in present time and get all of the bodies in sync. And I guess the only thing that I wanted to add on timing is that sometimes the time feels right in different bodies, but there's an intuitive part of ourselves that holds back for some reason. And it's one of the things that I do when I make summer camp or all of these other things. I wait for the exact timing intuitively, because I feel that the intuitive timing, because of its power, because of its essence, because of what it is, and because I stay in present time so often, I'll have the ability to change something at any given moment, because you feel it so much righter at that given time. I could plan different things in advance, but if the timing's not really right for it, I'll stall, and I'll look foolish stalling. I do that with summer camp. I wait till the universe tells me that summer camp is a happening thing and that this is the way that it's supposed to go. I also do that with a lot of different workshops. I'll change several workshops in several locations just because of the timing, just because I don't quite feel right with the way that it goes. I've also learned to pay attention to how those feelings inside of me work and what that stuff is all about. So that's all I wanted to add on timing. Timing is self-explanatory. I talked enough about it yesterday. There is a time where some people say, well, geez, Dennis, you're a little redundant in the tape sometimes, wrapping it over and over and over and over and over and over. Yeah, I know. I strategically do that. For those of you who go, well, geez, it's just, 20 minutes of information and the rest is Dennis talking. For those of you who have my tapes, you figured it out already. It's not just Dennis talking. You will find little itty-bitty pieces of truth here, little itty-bitty pieces of truth there, and basically, the key to using a tape is repetition. If I can repeat the same scenario that I'm trying to get across enough times, then I hit everybody's personality. As a teacher, I'm very good at what I do, and so sometimes repetition seems to be something that I'm stuck in, and yet, don't be fooled by that. Be aware of the obvious. If it's that obvious that I'm just sitting around saying nothing, pay attention. I sure love you guys, and I love laughing, I love having a good time. The things that I'd really like to cover today is a new field. I haven't really covered it a lot. This was Easter, and Easter is a time of renewing. Easter is a time to reflect, I think. Easter also is a really big time for me. I've noticed that as a spiritual being, whenever there are big-time holidays, whether they're Christian or Catholic or Lutheran or Buddhist or Hindu or Seventh-day Adventist or Mohammedism, or you name the holidays, and if you pay attention at all, what you'll discover is that there's a real unique energy on that day. Even if you didn't know it was a holiday, you will find that it's kind of unique for you. And what I've discovered is that we have this group energy, sort of race karma. Now, when I say karma, don't infer that the word means negative. There's positive karma as well as negative karma. Now, positive karma is when a seasonal holiday comes up, a special religious feast or something like that. On those days, you've got a ton of people praying. Whether they're buying into the holiday or whether they're even relating to the fact that, Easter Jesus rose from the dead, and, even if they're thinking that or not, there's that collective energy. It's really hauling butt. It's kind of moving around and jiving and churning on us. We should pay attention to those days and try to, get in on them. Talk to our divinity a little more on these times than usual. Easter naturally never lets me down, sort of like Christmas. Easter and Christmas, for me as a personality, seem to be quite unique. I'm able to cook into unusual states of consciousness and really get some good insights. One of the insights that I would like to share is based on forgiveness. You will never hear me speak about it in a workshop, because I've been working on it for, 44 years now. Forgiveness is a big one because, let's see. 1, I could never understand it. 2, because I was raised a Roman Catholic, forgiveness and confession were a big scenario. Third thing about forgiveness is that because I don't believe there's any right or wrong, good or bad, I have a hard time asking for forgiveness because I didn't do anything wrong. See how that stuff kind of works? And so forgiveness to me has sort of been a perplexing scenario for a long, long time. I've also paid attention to the fact that forgiveness is majorly big in every religion's rap. If they don't have it listed per se as forgiveness, they have it listed as loving your neighbor. Now, I know forgiveness and loving your neighbor may be extremely opposite, but as you love your neighbor, and as you share and you give all of that blessings to your neighbor, remember who your neighbor is. It's the reflection of you. And so as you give this lovingness to your neighbor, you're giving lovingness to yourself. And the truth of the matter is, by loving others, you love yourself, which in turn, you're forgiving yourself for acting a certain way, and you're acknowledging the positive side of the forgiveness. Now, I kind of correlated loving oneself and forgiving oneself kind of in the same clump there, and I'll see how we work out with this. Forgiveness. It's a word. It's a noun. It's not a noun. That was me just trying to sound educated. It could be a noun. It sounds more like an adjective or an adverb, or it's probably a bunch of all of those things because it encompasses such a great meaning. It, first for me, would bring up a lot of negative feelings for me. It's sort of like, hey, I'm doing the right thing. Hey, I'm on this. I don't need forgiveness. I didn't do anything wrong. Because I'm doing the very best that I can in every given moment. And so I've always been perplexed with this thing called forgiveness. And I've noticed that people in religions and things put a lot of weight on it. If you can forgive yourself, then, or if you can get forgiveness from others, somehow we feel better. If we slight somebody, if I've noticed us properly, we're always trying to make it right again, to make it better. And so I've noticed that even though we may do the right thing, we're apologetic sometimes for our clarity, because we've noticed that sometimes we offend some people by what we say, although what we're saying is the truth, and we sort of want to ask them, oh wow, well I really didn't mean to say it this way, could you forgive me for being so blunt? So forgiveness is one of those things that you will find, even though it's looking like we should forgive others, we're basically looking like we should forgive ourselves. And so forgiveness falls into two categories: forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. Forgiving others is no more than forgiving ourselves by proxy. Now, I've looked at forgiveness, and this is what I've observed for myself. I stay in present time. And during that present time, like everybody else, because I'm just basically a person, there will be times when I will say something wrong, because my ego, for instance, has somewhat of a charge every now and then. Example. I live here in Mount Shasta. It's a wonderful town. And I ran into a friend today, and there was going to be an early morning meeting in town for healers. And I guess it was a gathering, I don't know, 15, 20 healers or whatever. And some of the friends that I knew were going. And they had asked me, they had sort of said, well, geez, Dennis, you going to go to the meeting? And I hadn't been asked. And I kind of chuckled to myself, thinking, well, geez, of all of the healers in town, I'm basically the one that had the clinic, and, you know, and have known it all over the country for it. And I was a little surprised that I wasn't invited to a healing meeting of healers in the town. And so I noticed that my personality got tweaked, just a hair. And I made the remark about, oh yeah, all the hardcore healers are going to be making a gathering together. And I noticed that I did have a personality kick on that. I was a little, my personality went, healers got invited and you didn't, Now, as I went to make a remark back about their little meeting, I noticed that I had to carefully watch every word, because as a personality, I got tweaked. I got tweaked to the fact that I didn't get invited to a meeting of the healers in Mount Shasta. And I didn't quite know how to deal with that. And I noticed that I had to do everything that I could to stay positive and not make a smart-ass little remark like, yeah, right, they think they're healers. I noticed I had to stay on that. I also noticed that I did fairly well, except that the thought jumped through my head, like, why wasn't I invited? How come I'm not considered to be a healer? And I got into a little resentment, like, well, who the hell do they think they are? And I put that thought out, like, who do they think they are? Now, it's a simple little thought, but I don't like it. And I've noticed that I don't want that single thought of me thinking that I wasn't part of the whole and feeling excluded and not, being one of the healers that was invited. And so all of a sudden, I had to work on myself. I had to work on not making a judgment. And I made a tiny itty-bitty one. And what I need to do now is ask for forgiveness. You see, I put the thought out. I know that it went out. And it was perfect that it happened, because I got to use it as an example. Once again, the universe never lets me down. I don't think that it's much of a forgiveness. I just look inside of myself and I say to myself, wow, God, I see that you kind of went off center a little bit there, Dennis. You took it a little personally, buddy. You felt that, wow, you were left out as a healer. And you actually did put out a little bit of Not resentment, because it didn't take that much of a charge, but I did put out a thought that, wow, I wasn't included, and therefore I felt slighted. And there's that slighting of those people for not asking me to be there. And so what I do is I ask myself to forgive myself for doing that particular scenario. I've also noticed that through the day, just by being a human being, just by being like everybody else on this planet, there are those little things that I go through for a day that I say, and I catch myself on a lot of them, but not everything do you catch, even though you're constantly on it. I've noticed that as I would come up here, I was beginning to feel like, wow, am I really doing a good job? You know how sometimes when we're really ready to learn a lesson, we apply pressure to ourselves so that we can force what it is that we're working on to the surface so that we don't go into the denial, and we can really get it to the surface and work on it. And I have been working on forgiveness for a while. I've noticed that in a day, there are a lot of things that I will say that may not be the most positive thing that I could have done. There are things in a day where I will slip and say something and try to catch myself, and if I miss myself because I wasn't paying attention 1,000%, things get by that I'll make a motion to the universe that may not be the lovingest thing. I may have a thought for a split second that may not be the most lovingest thing. And even though they're not negative, they're just me being me and growing, I find that they weren't the most positive, loving aspect. At the end of the day, I sit, or in the middle of the day, even in the beginning of the day, if I see that I've kind of gone astray, and hey, let's face it, it's not that we intentionally go astray. Anything in the world can grab us and pull us off center. Anything in the world can just sort of snag us for a split second. And boom, we put out a little thought that may not be the most supportive to who it is that we are. And the next thing I know is I can feel that thought that wasn't real supportive of the universe starting to repeat itself in the patterns that I see. And then it repeats itself a little more and a little more and a little more, so that it can bring its attention to me that, yo, Dennis, pay attention over here. You may be throwing out something that is not completely filled with unconditional love. I've learned to take a moment during the day and talk to my God self, and basically just sort of say a simple little prayer, sort of like, you know what, God? I noticed that I didn't send a full case of unconditional love to the healing meeting that I wasn't invited to. And you know what? I also noticed that because I wasn't invited, I got a little bit of my personality button pushed, God. And you know what? I want to acknowledge you right now, Father, for keeping me so aware of myself that I've noticed and caught myself doing these things. I honor you, Father, in the fact that you have brought that gathering together, and that to teach me a lesson, or to give me an example in forgiveness, you let this come up for me so that I could talk about it in a tape and really solidify the example. Father, in this very moment as I talk on this tape, I ask forgiveness of myself for seeing that because I wasn't invited, I wanted to slight somebody else. Father, I want to thank you for allowing me to see these things that are not the most loving in my day. And Father, I truly ask for the forgiveness of allowing myself to not be the most positive. As I talk with you, Father, I know that just like when I was a kid in confession, and I would come out of confession and I would I would say my penance, and I would get that tremendous feeling over me. Also now, Father, as I talk with you and say, God, I'm really sorry for slighting these people, I can feel the lovingness and the forgiveness come into my heart with love saying, wow, Dennis, you were working so hard. Of course you were forgiven. And whatever negative thoughts that you may have put out there, we cancel them for you. I say we because God has so many avenues and saints and masters and angels and things that we don't even know about. Lords of karma, taking care of all of the things for us in that support of the totality. And by asking for that forgiveness, I feel good inside of myself because I'm acknowledging to me that I'm catching little things that I should be paying more attention to. And by paying more attention to those little things, God, basically I notice that you point them out to me frequently, and I'm able to see them more. And I instantly ask for the forgiveness, and boom, I feel good. And that's my prayer to God, to ask for the forgiveness for, sure, it could seem like a silly little thing to you, but hey, it's just another thing to me where I put out not a negative thought, but not the most positive thought for my future. See, the forgiveness thing has eluded me for a long time, especially as being a Catholic. For those of you who are Catholic, picture this. Here you are, and you're this little Catholic kid, and you're told that confession is a form of forgiveness, and you tell God the things that you've done wrong, and God makes them better. Well, for most of those of you who were Catholics, remember the first couple times you went to confession? You hadn't done anything wrong. See, as a kid, I was sitting in my first confession, see, and I'm sitting there, and I'm supposed to tell this guy in this little concealed box that you can't see, you're supposed to tell him all the things that you've done wrong against God. See, now as a kid, these are our very first impressions. I mean, these are things that are pounded into our head that create part of who we are in our lives. And so, I'm trying to make up sins to tell this guy so that I feel that I've done this thing called confession. Basically, the only thing that I did wrong was everything I told the priest I lied about. So the only thing I really needed to tell him was I had to lie to confess because I hadn't really done anything against God. Now, forgiveness, therefore, really threw me from a very early age because I was asking for forgiveness for things that I didn't know I was doing wrong. I thought I was doing everything according to God's will. I was a loving, caring person. And so my concept of forgiveness had been somewhat altered due to the fact of confession. And I'm sure that a lot of us had to go through that trauma. Think about it. Here you are, a pleasant child with no problems in your heart at all. You're loving, you're caring. Now you've got to go somewhere and tell somebody a bunch of stuff that you didn't do so that you can tell them something, so that you can feel that you've completed the spiritual acknowledgement. Whoa, that's heavy. Now, I've looked at this forgiveness thing, and I've worked it out into my adult life. See, I finally broke all of the patterns of childhood, all of the pictures of what forgiveness really means. I've been working on forgiveness in myself, and I've never really wanted to forgive myself for anything because I've never felt like I've done anything wrong. Until all of a sudden it really dawned on me that certain thoughts or certain responses or certain things that really aren't the way that I would be sort of come out, and they come out casually, and you don't pay that much attention to them because you go, well, hey, it's what I was supposed to experience, I'll get the payback for it, and it's all going to work out. Now, that's all well and good, but I really needed to know about other things, and so let me put together now what I've discovered as a personality. I think that this avenue of forgiveness that I've put together has helped me tremendously. Here we go. You're having a day that is nothing but goobers. It is not working right. Things aren't reflecting the way that you want them to reflect. Arguments seem to abound. Of course, you didn't start any of them. Of course, it was always the other person and their moronic stupidity as in bringing all of this stuff up. Of course, it was all their fault, so therefore you don't need any forgiveness. And then slowly you would begin to take a look at the day. Okay, these arguments, hey, it's never outside of yourself, Dennis. You've created them to learn and to grow. You bought into this little argument, I see, because you lost your center. Okay, so you lost your center. Now, that means that you're going to lose your center in the future because you lost it here and now. On the other hand, you caught yourself losing your center, and you also know that you've created this. Now you stop and you take a look at the whole situation. Okay, it's really not the person that started yelling at me. It was just really me creating that person to teach me something. Okay, now I'm looking at myself to understand what it is that it's trying to create, that I'm trying to teach myself. I totally understand that I've created this action, and if I can't remember creating the action in this life, or in this particular timing, maybe I created it in another life, and in another part of my existence. These things where we perhaps have created something in our other lives, they seem to jump up out of nowhere, and we're doing so well, and all of a sudden the world's turning to caca because in another life we may have totally missed something and we're replaying it. Now, I've often thought to myself, there must be a way of stopping the karma from other lives. There must be a way so that, yeah, I know I'm paying for this life for the last life, but there must be a way of eliminating that, because I remembered that God is an all-forgiving essence. And it's something in the past that is being brought into present time to help me grow is okay, except that eventually you have to figure out that it's part of your past also that's creating problems in present time. And why, seeing as how we're God, should we be messed with from other lives? In other words, yeah, we learned the lesson then and maybe we didn't, and so that's why it's coming back now. But hey, I'm tired of living this life with major surprises that I don't like, that don't fit in, that are going against my grain as being a loving person. And I'm saying to myself, wow, I know I'm really on it here and now. I know I've really been on it for the last, however many years it is. And what's going on? What do I do? So join me on the other side, and I'll tell you.